is Alex Lee, and I'm the Resiliency Coordinator and Housing Organizer at the Cooper Square Committee. And I am joined today by two staffers from Solar One Here Comes Solar team, Annika Worcester-Jones and Patrick Owusu. And today we're going to be providing you an exciting presentation about community shared solar. This is a great opportunity because it's really the first of its kind where you can subscribe to a program that allows you to receive solar as your electricity source without having solar panels on your roof. And for many years now, and when I say that, decades upon decades, solar was not available to almost everyone because not everybody, over 50% of rooftops are not in good enough shape to either install panels, they don't have enough room, or they don't receive enough sunlight. And also, we'll go into greater detail later about this program and the benefits and all the perks. But just to give a little more information about myself, for those who don't know me, I work for America's oldest anti-displacement organization, and we actually just recently celebrated our 60th anniversary, Cooper Square Committee, and we've been, since that time, working with area residents to contribute to the preservation and development of affordable, environmentally healthy housing and community cultural spaces all across Manhattan's Lower East Side, so that the LES remains racially, economically, and culturally diverse. And we look forward to many more years to come in this challenging 2020. It's a pleasure assisting the community. I actually work as part of the HDFC Green and Resilient program at Cooper Square, and it's a pleasure working with the HDFC community in Manhattan's Lower East Side. In fact, Manhattan's Lower East Side has one of the highest densities of HDFC co-ops. New York City has a little over 1,000 of these cooperatives, and the Lower East Side has plenty, well over 100, and in a very densely populated area. So the HDFC Green and Resilient program at Cooper Square was launched back in the fall, I believe, 2011. And since then, we've been assisting the HDFC community to preserve healthy reserve funds through sustainability and resiliency efforts. And along with that, we help these co-ops, individuals, and boards find cost-effective and affordable capital improvements, really to help them remain functional in terms of their buildings, working efficiently and resulting in long-term savings. The challenge is a lot of these HDFC co-ops are very old housing stock, most of whom are pre-war buildings that are walk-ups that are in dire need of capital repair. And actually more than 60% of HDFCs are in the flood zone in New York that's east of Avenue B in what many call Alphabet City. And a lot of those co-ops were actually impacted after Superstorm Sandy back in the fall of 2012, excuse me. And really one of the lessons learned after Hurricane Sandy was that there needs to be a greater effort for all who live in this community, especially in the flood zone, that future planning so that they are more resilient and better prepared for these storms and extreme weather is absolutely critical. And I think New Yorkers across the city realize just how vulnerable we are in this era of climate change, and a shift is needed. And a shift is also needed in the sense that more and more people should realize the benefits of solar as a approach towards resiliency and less dependency on this grid in New York that is extremely overworked and outdated, similar to the New York City subways, which are in dire need of improvement. So um, over the years, and when I say over the years, several years, Cooper Square has had a partnership with Solar One's Here From Solar team, and we've assisted a lot of HDFCs, and Solar One has been instrumental in educating a lot of these co-ops on the need to explore solar as an option, providing free technical assistance. Now, of course, this workshop is focused on community solar, so this is a very new program, and very exciting that you all are joining us today. So, now been, since community solar got its start off, was officially launched in New York, and was approved by the Public Service Commission and became another source of renewable energy. It was back in the spring of 2018 that New York City had its first two community solar installations. And two of these were built in central Brooklyn, East New York, to be exact. And as you can see in this slide, the top image is actually one of those arrays on one of the first two rooftops. And as you can see, this is a very large array that allows people all across New York that are part of the same, that receive, all receive Con Edison and are eligible. This can provide electricity, as you can see, to lots of people. It's a very big array. But moving into 2020, all 5 boroughs in New York City now have community solar projects. In fact, to this date, there are 49 projects that have been completed for a total of 17 milliwatts of solar, and 141 projects are still currently in the works for an additional 56 milliwatts of solar as of this past May 31st, 2020. And as I know, the state of New York, I believe, in its entirety has a little over 100 projects. Last I checked, I'm pretty sure it was 99 back in the year 2019. So in terms of who can sign up, almost anybody. And those, especially who have a Con Edison account, this is a pretty easy, step forward, clear process. And we'll be talking later during this presentation about how to get you started if you're interested. And there's really nothing to lose, only to gain if you're eligible in terms of saving. We all know that New York is just becoming more and more expensive. People's utility bills are going up. Cost of living is going up. So community solar is a great means to, especially for low-income New Yorkers and those who are struggling right now to really lower their electric bills. So this is, as I mentioned before, the first time people can start receiving the benefits of solar without installing it on their roof. And therefore, this is a very exciting opportunity that more and more people need to get a better, clear understanding of why it's such a great idea to sign up if you can. So, after what I just mentioned before, first I'll mention that to the left, you can see that's another panoramic view of one of the first community solar arrays in central Brooklyn that was constructed in 2018, I believe in the spring. And in terms of why you should sign up, it's a guaranteed savings on your future electric bills. And there will be no surprises, just clear savings. And while doing so, you're also contributing to the efforts of us all who care about the environment in terms of lowering the carbon footprint and carbon emissions overall during this era of continuous fight to help fight climate change. This is definitely a necessity for us all to help begin the process, or rather continue the process of lowering carbon emissions and fighting climate change. And while doing so, community solar is continuing to grow across the country, but in New York, by signing up, you're supporting local clean energy. And when I say local, you're supporting local projects. We'll be talking more into detail later about some of these other types of electricity utility accounts people have that aren't necessarily benefiting the local population of New York and providing new jobs in a workforce. And also, what makes community solar another perk is that it's free to sign up, and there's no upfront fees, nor are there cancellation fees. So it's a win-win. So now I'm going to pass it over to Annika from Solar One.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. I just want to, before I start, I want to reiterate that if you have a question, you can use either the chat function, which many people are using already, or the Q&A button, which is also at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining us on a phone, you can press *9, which will raise your hand, and then we can call on you at the end of the presentation, so you can ask your question verbally. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end, so if we store them up as we go along, you write them down when you think of them, then we'll be able to have a good conversation at the end. So just a little bit about Solar One and our organization. Solar One is an environmental education nonprofit. We work to make it possible for New Yorkers to be part of a sustainable revolution in New York City. So we have a number of different programs to do that. One of them is our worker training program, where we train people in the city to do solar installations, electrical work, other types of building maintenance, carpentry, things like that, give people good job skills. And we also have a clean energy education program in public schools, which is really booming for the schools. As you might know yourself, there's a park on the East River called Stuyvesant Cove Park. We manage that park. It's got entirely native species of plants in it, so it's a good example of what kinds of plants were originally here in Manhattan. And then the Here Comes Solar program that Patrick and I are part of is really working to bring down the barriers of going solar for New Yorkers. So just to give you some context, solar around the world has become much, much cheaper in the past couple decades. And because of that, it's grown in size really exponentially, especially on single family homes in suburban areas. It's become really cheap and really easy and really cost effective for people to go solar. But in New York City, there's still a number of barriers that people face. Construction is much harder in the city. Multifamily buildings are just generally harder to organize than a single person sitting at their kitchen table and making a decision to go solar. And also just the environment of all these buildings tightly packed together, some of them shading each other, can make it more difficult for solar. But that doesn't mean that solar isn't a good and beneficial prospect for people in New York. It just means that you need to know more about it before you go in. And so that's where Here Comes Solar comes in. We provide that technical assistance and know how to make it easy for people to really realize the benefits of solar. So in our general program, we provide site analysis to see whether a building is viable for solar. We do workshops like this one and many other types, and answer lots and lots of questions about how solar works for any given building. We do a cost savings estimate for buildings specific to what kinds of solar would be viable for their roof, and help them find financing. If they decide to go solar, we can help them choose a solar installer who, through a competitive bidding process. And then as the installation is going through, we provide consumer advocacy and make sure the installer does what they say they're going to do throughout the whole process. So that's our general program. But this is really only viable for people who have control of their own roofs. So, you know, co-op board members or landlords, but for renters or individual residents of a co-op, it's much harder to actually make the decision to install solar on a roof. So that's where community solar comes in. I also want to give a little bit more context about solar specifically in New York City. Obviously, solar is very important for any kind of climate solution, as Alex said. But here in New York, it's especially important because since we have a very overworked but still really effective public transportation system, buildings account for 70% of New York City emissions. So if you want to reduce New York City's carbon footprint, buildings are really a huge part of that. Last year, New York City Council passed the Climate Mobilization Act, which put a price on carbon and requires solar to be installed on any kind of new construction project. And so this is part of that. And maybe more importantly, solar really benefits our old constrained grids. New York has one of the oldest grids, or if not the oldest grid in the world. You know, Thomas Edison built the first power plant in Lower Manhattan, and we're still building off of that today. And that's one of the reasons why electricity is so expensive here in New York. It's one of the most expensive electric rates in the country. And so the energy burden here in New York is very high. And so solar savings can really reduce the energy burden for all of us, but especially for low-income New Yorkers. And more solar really means more green jobs in the city. Solar installation is something that it's not the kind of job that you can just outsource. So any solar installation has to be installed by people who live and work here in New York City. And one other thing that I kind of touched on through these other points, but solar really reduces the demand for some of the oldest and most polluting power plants that exist in the city that are only really used in the daytime, in the summer when it's especially hot out and electricity usage is really high because everyone has their air conditioners on. The city, when that happens, the city turns on these very old, very dirty oil, small oil-based power plants that are very polluting, and maybe no surprises, are primarily located in low-income communities, and so they contribute to the pollution and health effects in those communities. And so these large community solar projects really directly affect the need for turning on those peaker plants and can significantly impact the pollution levels in our communities. So community solar in particular can have a big effect on that. So I will pass things over to Patrick here to explain how community solar works. Again, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A box and a chat box. Either of those will get to us, and you can ask your questions as we go along. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a chance to answer all the questions at once and have a discussion together. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Annika. So now we're going to be talking about community solar, which is that great alternative for individuals who can't install solar in New York City for whatever reason. So that's two main reasons for why, even though as solar is a booming industry, people cannot still install solar, is that they have unsuitable roofs. And two of the main reasons for that, as you can see with the circled building, it's surrounded by taller buildings, which shows a significant amount of shading, which prevents like proper solar from being installed on that roof. And even to the building next to it on the right, even though it's taller and it isn't shaded out, it has a lot of complex equipment on it, HVAC systems, electrical equipments that the building needs in order to operate, but as a result gets in the way of its solar viability. And on the other side, a lot of us New Yorkers are renters. We're not owners of buildings. So because of that, we can't install solar on our own because we don't have the roof space to do so, which is why community solar helps to fill in that gap for people who can't. So this is a little web that we have, and we're going to break it down for how community shared solar works for the individual. The first step of the process is the solar installation, which is not on the subscriber end, it's on the community solar provider. They find a roof space or an open field somewhere in like the 5 boroughs where they're able to install solar. They go through the whole procurement and installation process. And once it's up and installed, that solar system sends energy into our Con Edison's grid. And in the second stage for Con Edison, they having this energy being sent to the grid, we are able to use that energy in the form of solar credits to be able to decrease the amount that we pay for energy overall. And this community solar aspect can be utilized not only by renters, it could be used by small businesses and essentially anyone at this point who pays a Con Edison bill can tap into these savings. So to preface this, these next 2 points, 3 and 4, there is currently a 2-bill system that equates to savings. And Con Edison right now has been tasked by next year to make this into a streamlined 1-bill system, which will take away a lot of the complications that comes in having a 2-bill system. It'll be a lot easier to understand and to see how you're saving. But for now, on the Con Ed side of things, you see solar credits are marked as adjustments. And you can see on this Con Ed bill, $90.68 worth of solar credits is used on this bill. So that's money that you won't have to pay to Con Edison because you have those solar credits. And on the second bill from the community solar provider, you see those $90.68 of solar credits that was used to bring down your Con Ed bill. However, on the right side in the orange box, you see the amount owed, which is how much you're expected to pay for those credits. So even though there's 2 bills, even though there's that you're paying Con Edison for what's left over from the credits, and you're also paying the community solar provider, you're still able to save 10%, which in this case is $9.07. And this is the breakdown for monthly savings. Before, you had your Con Edison bill with the payments that you'd normally pay, and the after side is you still paying whatever's left on the Con Ed bill, the solar payment to the solar system owner / provider, and the orange box that's not filled in is the savings that you're expected to see from subscribing to community solar. And with community solar, there's some important terms that we look out for, which is that these community solar providers we work with, they don't cost any money to sign up. It's free to sign up. They have a 12-month term for community solar, which means that for 12 months, you'll be subscribed to that system. And if you want to continue to stay subscribed to the system, they have an auto renewal option where you can automatically be renewed for further subscriptions to community solar. And if you move anywhere in New York City and you don't want to keep community solar with you, you get to keep it active on your Con Edison account for the next place you move into, as long as you still pay a Con Edison bill and you're within New York City. And lastly, there's no cancellation fees. So if, let's say, you're moving out of state and you want to cancel community solar, you can do so, and there wouldn't be any fee penalties in the contract, they might say, just let us know like 30 to 90 days in advance of what you're going to do. And after that, you can leave, no penalties. And what's also important is that not all community solar providers offer these terms. We've seen contracts from different community solar providers that we wanted to work with, and they've either had less savings, like 5% versus 10%, on the credits you use, or they have cancellation fees and termination clauses that would cost you money if you wanted to leave, or they would have like those same less in savings, but they'd say if you stay with us for 6 months, we might give you a gift card for like you staying subscribed with us, which is it's an interesting way to butter people up, but overall there's still less savings through that. So we like to work with community solar providers that give the best savings, that are simple, easy to work with, easy to understand, and don't hold you bound to contracts with financial penalties. So it's important to understand with community solar why this is different from ESCOs or energy supply companies, since they seem on pen and paper to be giving you the same thing. So community solar is a local renewable energy that exists within New York City. And that's by design. This is solar projects that New York City is trying to establish in the city. So it's always going to be local for this community solar. And the percent discount is guaranteed. It's built in the community solar. It's something that our energy that the energy agencies that help to make this possible have been working with. So it's supposed to give you savings no matter what. That's intentional. And this is a new market. It's been up for 2 years now, since 2018. So there's a lot of changes that could be made to make it better. And one of the changes that even happened last year, a year into it, was that they opened it up to higher energy consumption bills like EL8 and EL9s, which means that more people than ever before are able to subscribe to community solar. And as a subscriber, you are the demand. And when there's more demand than supply, there needs to be more community solar projects made. So with more people interested in community solar, we get to see more solar projects built in the city. So it's a positive feedback. And on the other side, for energy supply companies, ESCOs, they tend to only cover the supply portion of your bill, which is the energy getting sent to you, but they won't cover like demand portions and other portions of the bill that community solar would cover. So they just purely cover that energy going to you and nothing else for the Con Edison bill. The other aspect that they have is variable rates, which is that in the beginning they have introductory rates that are less at times than what you would normally pay through Con Edison. So it seems like an attracting offer at first, but then after that introductory phase ends, then they would raise those rates sometimes to even twice as much as the initial rate or what you may have been paying before. So you end up not saving money. You end up paying a lot more for the idea, the intent of energy, renewable energy. And also, green ESCOs, they purchase these renewable energy credits to make sure that they're certified as a clean energy provider. But in that it doesn't exactly mean that they are 100% clean energy. It's just that they have enough those credits to certify themselves as clean energy. So you might not always get that clean energy sent to your account, or if they do promise that you do get that clean energy account, there's still those rates that will go up. So then you end up paying a premium for this service, even though you might in truth be getting that clean energy. And also, like they said in community solar, it's always local energy in New York City. But in energy supply companies, your energy could be coming from as close to as upstate or even out of state. So that energy isn't fueling your local grid. It isn't greening like New York City. It's just energy that's coming from somewhere else. So it's nice to note that the energy in community solar is from our neighborhoods, from our city, from where we live. And that was a lot to take in. And I do see there are some questions to be answered now. So if you have any other questions as well. Yeah, let's dive into that. Window installations. That is a good question. Solar is an industry that's constantly being worked on and has been getting, did you want to answer that, Annika, or?
Oh, no, I just wanted to make it visible to other people.
Okay, so perfect. So there are currently ways to install solar panels on windows. The solar panels that exist on windows aren't as high efficiency or power as the ones that get installed on the roofs. And that's just the technology being worked out. And as time passes and they're able to perfect the technology for these Windows style installations, they will get better. But right now, I'm not sure the exact percentage, but it's definitely at the very least like half as effective as on rooftops. So they work. You could install theoretically like solar on your window. It's just not as efficient as a rooftop installation. And it's easier to realize the savings from community solar than from a window installation. But feel free to do that if you want to do a window installation. They work as long as you get proper sun exposure.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, there's two main barriers to using solar panels in your windows. One is what Patrick was saying, that they're much less effective. So even if you covered all of your windows with solar panels and didn't have any light entering your apartment, which you probably wouldn't want to do, you still probably couldn't cover any significant portion of your apartment's bills, because if you think about it, solar panels need direct sunlight, and so more often than not, the sun is going to be above us in the sky. So if the panels are on the roof, then they can see the sun when it's above us. But if you have windows that are vertical, the sunlight will only directly hit those panels if first of all, they're not being shaded by any other buildings nearby, which isn't likely for most apartments and most buildings in the city. But also it would only be in like the early morning and the late afternoon when the sunlight is coming more horizontally. So, so the efficacy is pretty low. And then the other thing is just that it would be hard, if not impossible, to rewire your apartment to only function from those solar panels. So you would probably need to like install a battery in your apartment, and then at that point it gets really complicated. So we usually recommend either talking to your building about putting solar on the roof, or as Patrick was saying, doing community solar. It's much more effective. There are some really cool, beautiful solar like solar art that you can hang in the window, and then you can like charge a cell phone from it, but you would never be able to cover your entire apartment's bill.
This next question we have is this only for electric energy? Because in our co-op, our building pays for gas, but the individual apartment owner pays their unit's electric. Therefore, the information would need to be disseminated to each unit and not apply to the building as a whole. Yes, community solar does work only for electric energy and not for gas energy. And yeah, that's basically it.
One thing I would recommend, and we talk about this a lot with co-ops, is that the building installs, if it's viable, the building installs solar on the roof for the building's common area electrical usage. And so then the building can reduce its operating costs. But then each individual apartment dweller can do community solar from a warehouse somewhere else. And so overall, the entire building can be powered by solar in one way or another. But the solar on the roof is applied to the common areas, and the solar somewhere else in the city is applied to the apartments. So that's a really good option for the situation you're talking about.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of what you just mentioned, Annika, what's so great about community solar is that for those co-ops that already have, as you said, a solar panel array on their roof that powers the common area, now individuals can really have that opportunity to make it actually possible to sign up, not only individually, but so that the building can pretty much be completely dependent on renewable energy as opposed to relying on fossil fuels and the already limited, overworked New York City grid. So this makes it possible for buildings to go renewable and solar completely if individuals sign up and you already have a solar array on your roof that powers a building's common area.
A further comment, but I do get direct sun through a very large window during the summer. The candidate, the energy could be stored. Yeah, again, if you do get a window-based solar and solar, like even one of those artsy things, you could even like have like just a commercial, not commercial in a large sense, just like one of the battery packs. You could plug that into your solar window install, and that could like generate energy for it over time, and then you could use that as like your own little portable battery pack to like power your things. But again, it's in terms of like wattage that it can actually bring to your apartment, it would be a lot smaller, since with solar installations, the panels themselves are like 3 feet by 5 feet, like just for one panel. So, and that's like 315 watts or something. It can range, it can vary, but yeah, that's, and like for a general household, you'd need like 16 of those to be able to like comfortably power that window setup. I'm not trying to knock the window installations. I do like personally think that there is a need to look into technology like that, especially in like a city like this where, like we've said, a lot of roof space isn't good for solar. So we do need to look in different ways to be able to implement it. It's just a matter of time before like that technology does catch up. But yeah, I'm not too sure about has Con Edison been confronted with window arrangements. I know that there are times when there are vertical installs, which aren't as efficient as horizontal ones, but maybe you could talk about that more, Annika?
Yeah, I don't think that there are any window installations that have been associated with that have gone through Con Edison, because as I said, the only option is to create a separate electrical system with a battery, so it's not really associated with Con Edison at all. But there are vertical solar installations that are like on the exterior walls of buildings, and you can see some of those. Is a college in northern Manhattan that I can't remember which one has a vertical solar wall that you can see, but that's the closest I know of.
Annika, maybe that's City College in Harlem?
It's not City College, I know that. It's
right.
Another one that I don't remember.
Yeah. And people have been looking into window installations too. There are like a lot of little companies that are starting up. Um, yeah, so they're out there if you're interested in like getting one and trying it out and see how it works for yourself. Um, Another thing to mention is that for community solar, like I said last year, it's opened up to EL9 and EL8 accounts as well. So that means like the master meter and like the sub-metering type of bills can also use community solar. The building manager would have to look into that for either the common areas or to like also apply it to those sub-metering accounts. So it wouldn't be the individual tenants that look into that, but you can definitely bring it up to your building manager and see if they're interested in looking into community solar, because it could be a great way for the building managers to save money and for the building itself to key into those savings that comes from solar energy. It's a question that we often get. Uh, Yeah. Another comment, good emergency setup for a blackout. Solar is definitely a great option for blackouts when paired with like battery storage, like we've been dancing around. Batteries are harder to install in the moment within the city, but we also have a resilient solar team on our Here Comes Solar team that is working on that aspect. So we're hoping to see more battery installations coming as well. We've with the Brooklyn Public Library is like one of the first groups that we've been able to like essentially help to get battery storage for them. So we're hoping that's like the first of many projects that happen in the city. So the next time, whenever a storm hits, we'll be much better prepared to weather it, to be able to help people out, to give them like emergency areas to be able to go to, charge their phones, let people know they're okay. And yeah. Um, and yeah, for that window solar panels, there is like one group that we've talked to in the past called Group Hug, and they've also been trying to experiment with window solar installations. So that could be your first step into looking into that if you're interested. They're a great group. Okay. Another question that I'm getting is, what if you or your or someone in your family or anybody in general knows a roof that they think would be good for solar? And that's a really good question to ask. And we at Solar One are have been working with like a lot of different buildings throughout the city to explore their solar capabilities. And we've worked with churches, we've worked with schools, we've worked with warehouse districts, and of course multifamily buildings, both affordable and market rate. We work with anybody who's essentially who's interested in looking into seeing if their building's roof is good for solar. And Yeah, so if you do know a building like that, we'd be happy to work with you on that. And our solar estimates are always free of charge so that you get to understand what your building's solar potential is, if there is. And if there isn't, we could always talk with you about alternatives or even community solar as well. So make sure that you come out that come out from that conversation with something productive. Anyone on another topic? Anyone on city council interested in more apartment buildings being required to install? I'd like to see such a bill before for the council. Um, yeah, that actually kind of touches on the local laws that were passed last year during the summer as part of the climate mobilization act. And in that, for new roof constructions, or if you have to do a complete like tear down and redoing of the roof, as well as new buildings being constructed after that point in time, you would have to look into getting solar installed on your roof or a green roof or some kind of combination of the two. So city council actually has been pretty proactive about it, and they passed that. So now it's working out the mechanics and making sure that it's something that everybody can understand and do without the hassle that comes with trying out this initial like very ambitious task. But yeah, there have been bills about that.
Yeah, so that's for new construction. For existing buildings, there's also the local law 97, which requires that buildings audit their energy usage, and if they are above a certain level, there'll be a certain level of carbon emissions. There'll be a penalty imposed, I think, starting in 2024. And so for that, solar, even if it's not specifically solar related, solar really would make a big difference in reducing the energy budget for buildings. And so it can be effectively required on existing buildings, even if it's not explicitly required. There's also a new requirement for new developed affordable housing through New York City's Department of Housing Preservation and Development. And for those buildings, solar is required as long as it's cost effective. So it's not required if, it would never pay for itself, but if the system pays for itself within 10 years, then it's required for the developer to include solar. So there are actually quite a few bills like that have already been passed, which is really exciting.
But I do see your question. Blackouts, besides us storing on batteries, would the solar energy still be delivered by Con Edison during the blackout? Or once there's a blackout, that's all for electricity? So solar panels are tied to the grid. So if the grid does go down, then the solar panels would stop working as a safety precaution. So when Con Edison workers go to work on the grid, they are not at risk of being electrocuted by energy still being sent into the grid by solar panels. However, if you do have battery backup on your establishment, on your property, whether it be like in a larger multifamily in the basement or like by the side of your private residence, if you do use the solar panel in conjunction with the batteries, you can send energy into your batteries. So then when the grid goes down, your battery becomes your backup, and you can use that energy to power your house for emergency needs until the grid comes back up. And yeah, no problem. Do you want to say anything else, or was it just to alert about the question?
Any last questions from anyone before we close out?
Yeah, going once, going twice. Before we wrap up, I also want to point out that this is still like a relatively new opportunity program, community solar in New York. So over time, it's going to become more and more consumer friendly, and it already a lot of like new material to grasp. But just think of us as in Cooper Square and Here Comes Solar. Team at Solar One as consumer advocates. Like, we're trying to save you money whenever possible, and we highly encourage you to keep in touch with us. And really, the next steps, I should be, we'll provide you with our email contact information, but it's as simple as sending us a scanned copy of one of your recent Con-Ed electric bills, and we will then put together a free solar savings estimate report to determine how much you would save by signing up with community solar. And really, you have nothing to lose, only to gain. And this is only going to become a bigger and bigger program that's proven across the country. It's one of the areas of solar that's continuing to thrive, continuing to grow, and more and more people are signing up. And it's available in many states. So expect to hear more in the near future, because as mentioned before, more and more people are spending money on their electric bills. So this is a cost-effective solution, and you have nothing to lose, only to gain. One more question.
We do have one last question. How much ampere can a solar panel on the room produce? I'm assuming on the roof.
Yeah, I can't remember what the average amperage is of a solar panel, but I can find that out for you. There's all of the solar panels have spec sheets that say it, and we rarely look at that because we're looking at total production and usage, but I can find it out for you and let you know later. But thank you, everyone. This has been really lively and fun conversation to have with you guys. We'd love to help you learn more about either community solar for your apartment or solar installed on your building, or any other solar questions that you have. We're always here to help. So thanks again for coming.
Yeah, thanks again for everybody for joining us today. Really means a lot, and so glad that technology can keep us together even during these challenging times for us all. But I also encourage you to not only stay in touch with us regarding solar related topics, but also feel free to reach out to me at Cooper Square. I can provide you with other information regarding energy efficiency options for your co-op. Also, there's tons of ways to help save money on your utility bills and make your building more sustainable for years to come. And also, Solar One can also provide lots of other opportunities, as I mentioned before, through technical assistance. If your co-op is interested in exploring a rooftop option, we can also put together like a solar viability study using technology to determine how much sunlight your roof receives. And yeah, it's great because there's plenty of different things that both of our organizations can do to help support you and your HDFCs. So thanks again, everybody, and please stay in touch.
Have a great afternoon.